Hi, everyone, and welcome to our webinar. I am Abram Kielsmeyer-Jones, and this is the beginning of what last time was a 7-part series. I imagine it will be 7 parts again this time. It's called Searches in Accordance, Basic to Intermediate, and today is part 1. I offered this partway through 2024. I think it was in May or so, and I wanted to offer it again with some additions this time, probably adding a few more details that we didn't do last time if you were there. And if you weren't, this is a great webinar to really just get to know accordance at a basic level. We talk about searching, which is, there's lots of things you can do in accordance, but fundamentally, accordance is, among other things, it's a search engine that you can use for your Bibles or your commentaries, any tools that you have. And so it is programmatically built with searching a primary text in mind. Like I said, there's lots of other stuff you can do, but searching in accordance is pretty foundational to what the app is. And it can be very powerful if you know the different ways to do it. So that's what we're going to do with this Searches in Accordance series. And I'm calling it basic to intermediate because we are going to start, especially today, at a very basic level, just the ground level of where do you go in accordance to search stuff, what's it called, and then we're going to just look at searching by verses and searching by words, and that's it for today. We're going to progress beyond that. By the time we're done, we will have made our way through multiple search commands and how you can combine not just multiple words, but where the words occur in relation to each other, and lots of fun searches that you can do. So even at the end of the 7 weeks, we will leave some territory unexplored. You can get very advanced with things like construct searches, and in the original languages, you can do lots of different kinds of searching in accordance. Everything in this series is going to be based on the English text, although much of what we do, if not all of it, will be applicable. You can use it in other languages, and even if you're doing Hebrew, Greek, or Aramaic searches. With that said, this handout that you're seeing on my screen is available to you in the GoToWebinar control panel. And so if you don't see that already, go to where it says handouts, and just make sure that the triangle to the left of the word handouts is pointing down. That will expand that little part of the pane, and you'll see this PDF right here. If you are here live, that means you registered, which means you're also going to get this PDF sent to you in an email later today. It will come to your inbox along with the recording. And if you're watching this on a recording later and you want to access the handout, email me at abramkj@accordancebible.com, and I would be happy to email this to you. And I realize that I'm talking, and I am Abram, but it's showing me as Linda, so I've just made that change in the GoToWebinar control panel. All right, I think that's enough of logistics unless you have questions. And if you have questions or comments at any point, feel free to put them in. That place to do that is in the questions box in the GoToWebinar control panel. That's like a one-way typed chat. Questions and comments come to me. I'll stop from time to time and read them and respond. All right, so today, beginning of this multi-part series, we're starting with looking at the search entry area, the go-to box, and then we're going to search by verse and verses, and search by word and words. There are some quick links here that I wanted to make sure that you had access to. The first is the Accordance help files, and I'm not going to click on these or walk anyone through these. These are for your reference. These are things that I refer to frequently, especially this top one. In fact, I referred to it in preparing for today. This is a link to the Accordance help files. If you follow this link, it will take you, you'll notice it's on the website. It will allow you to click on help files for whatever your Accordance version is. So whether that's Mac or Windows or 13 or 14 or whatever you've got, that will show there. You can also do this in app. If you just go to help, that menu up at the top, and Accordance Help, it will open it automatically to whatever you've got. So I'm on Accordance 13 on Mac. It knows that, and so it took me right there. Your app will do the same thing, or you can access it on the web. All right, so and then forums, you can go there to ask questions. Lots of times there are threads that have to do with how do I run this search, and it's always fun to see users across time zones and continents weigh in on those questions. So you might consider the Accordance forums as well as you're understanding more about searching. All right, we start with the search entry area. Sometimes you might see it called the search entry box in the help files. And if you open Accordance for the first time, you're going to see something like this, a new workspace. And a workspace is just the unit of the app. It's probably the broadest unit. Well, there's a session, which is multiple workspaces, but this workspace is just what it says. It's a place where you can put tabs and panes and multiple texts and so on. You when you open a workspace, it's going to open with your default search text. This is in your settings or preferences, and it's under search tab. Settings for new search tab. And that's what this workspace is here. It's a new search tab. And that's a technical name for it, new search tab. But again, Accordance is built with this foundational assumption that at least a lot of what you're going to be doing is searching a primary text in it. Now, you can use Accordance your whole life and never run a search. You could just browse and read and highlight and click hyperlinks and things like that. But the search tab, you can tell it what you want it to open by default when you open up a new search tab or a new workspace. So I've got that set to this NET Bible, 2nd edition, but you could change that. You can pick any of your texts. And note too that it's biblical text, but it's also specific text within that. So I've got, for example, a JPS with Strong's, that's a Bible text, but being the Jewish Publication Society, it's just the Hebrew Bible, or the Septuagint on a particular book, or even beyond the Bible per se, you've got Judean Desert Manuscripts or Josephus. If you were doing an extended research project in Josephus, you might wish to have Josephus open by default every time you open Accordance. So you can change that to whatever you want it to be here. And I mention that because what we're doing in this 7 or so part series is we're looking at searching an English Bible translation, but what we're talking about will apply to other texts as well. All right, so let's stay with this NET Bible. I'm going to click on OK. You'll see some other results here that you can adjust. These will make more sense as we go on throughout the series. But this right here, where it says in light gray, enter a verse reference, that is the search entry area. In other words, that's where my search query, my search string, my search argument, my search terms, whatever you want to call it, that's where it goes. There's a token here, so I can select what I search. And by the way, just this blue circle that you see around my cursor, that's not Accordance. That's an app called Pinpoint. It's a presentation app. So you won't see that unless you've got Pinpoint, which is totally separate from Accordance. But if you go here to this token and hover over it, you'll see a little pop-up tip, which says choose to search for words or verses. And that lets me know, which I've got in the handout, and that's why these are the number 2 and number 3 today. That's the first decision really that I need to make if I'm going to run a search in Accordance. Am I going to search for a verse reference or multiple verses or a few chapters or what have you? Or am I going to search for a word or a string of words? And again, hovering over this shows what's called a tooltip. This is not unique to Accordance. Lots of apps have this. That tells me, well, what happens if I click on this? Well, it's going to let me choose to search for words or verses. So I'm going to click on that. And now it actually gives me 4 choices. We're just going to look at words and verses for now, but I can switch to words. Let's say I don't want to run a verse search. I want to run a word search. Go to words. And now notice that light gray explanatory font in the search entry area changed. Enter a word or a phrase. If I go to Flex, it says the same thing. Well, we'll talk about what Flex is, but if I go to headings, same thing, enter a word or phrase. That's searching the Bible headings. But we're interested today, or at least I'm interested. If you're interested in the others, let me know. But primarily verses and words, and that's in the search entry area. So your first task after you've opened up a workspace, which will open to your default text, is to choose between a verse search or a word search. And we're going to start with a verse search. We'll talk about the go-to box in just a moment. So this, again, this is probably one of the more intuitive ways to use accordance, and this is something that you might, that a user who had never used accordance might be doing this already on a regular basis. You go to a search engine or Bible Gateway and type in a verse. So let's say I want to look up John 3:16. I'm going to start typing John 3, and accordance will recognize either the colon or a period to separate chapter and verse, and I type it in and hit enter, and it takes me right to John 3:16. Note that I've got a shortcut here to increase my font size, and I'm going to do that now. So I've got nice big font there, having run a search for John 3:16. I'm going to do that again with a different verse. I'm going to go to John 1:1, and I want to point out here that the font or the text in the search entry area is black. And that means that I have not run the search yet. So what I've got there is an unrun, if that's a word, an unrun search in the search entry area. And I can see that because I'm still at John 3:16. I've typed in John 1:1. All I have to do now is hit enter or return, and it runs the search, and then it turns my search string to gray, which is just a nice visual reminder that I have already run this search. So if I want to run another search, I can just go in there and delete it and type in something else. I could go to Mark 1:1. And again, accordance will recognize a colon. It will recognize a comma as the chapter and verse separator. It will also recognize a period for a chapter and verse separator. So you've got some flexibility there. So whatever's most comfortable to you, accordance can do. Those are all individual verses that I'm doing. Of course, you can search for a reference as well. And so I could do something like John 1:1 through 14, and it will pull up that whole thing. Although this is less relevant really, because you can always scroll forward and backwards when you run a search. I think where the verses search gets really powerful is if you want to search for multiple disparate verses, so verses that are not continuous. Because like I said, whether you search for John 1:1 or John 1 or John 1 through 5 or whatever, it's all there and you can scroll through and read it. But suppose you want to, maybe you're reading an article and it's got a string of verses and you want to be able to look them up quickly. You can just copy and paste it, and you might have something that you put there. You could also see, for example, how does every gospel begin? So for that, I can do Matthew 1:1, Mark 1:1, Luke 1:1, and John 1:1. And I've got the headings showing here. I can turn that off if I want to in the settings, but here is Matthew 1:1, here is Mark 1:1, here is Luke 1:1, and John 1:1, showing them all together. That's just one example. You may come to the search entry area from another resource, whether it's in accordance or elsewhere, especially like if you're reading on an e-reader or something that's not connected to accordance, and it's got, especially in biblical studies or books of theology, there tend to be just long strings of references. that you may want to look up all at once. And so I'm giving just one example here, but that's one way that you can use verses. And Accordance has a particular way of doing abbreviations. It's pretty flexible. So if I were to say, let's go to Obadiah. Now, Obadiah, this is a good example because it's just one chapter. And so I don't need to do chapter 1, chapter 2, because there is not more than one chapter. So if I did something like Obadiah 20, it would take me to the verse 20. If I did Obadiah 1:21, it would take me to verse 21. So it's flexible in that regard. It's also flexible in the sense that if I just type in the letter O and the number 3, and I have this set to verses, now this should take me to Obadiah verse 3, and it did, which is great. Accordance is pretty flexible and pretty smart on the abbreviations. Now that works not because O is a standard abbreviation for Obadiah, but because it's the only book of the Bible that begins with the letter O. I learned this from the help files as I was perusing them earlier today. This will not work for something like J, where you've got, in fact, you can even see it here. This quick entry comes down and shows you different book possibilities. So Joshua, Judges, Job, Jeremiah, Joel, Jonah. So if I type in J11, Accordance has no idea. There are not enough characters in the entry J to know which book is meant. So you'll just need to type in enough to be clear. Even JO is not clear, but JOS is clear enough for Joshua. JOH still needs to differentiate, and you can get all of this with this quick entry. It's almost like a kind of a tip as to what else you need to do to complete it. But there's really no use, well, I shouldn't say there's no use in learning the standard abbreviations. You may in fact be in a class or writing a paper where that's required. As far as Accordance is concerned, it is flexible. So whatever you want to type in for a book is just fine. I typically I'll just type in the full book if it's short enough, like Luke is short enough to type in, and here I am. If it's Obadiah, I might just intuitively do OBAD or OB or something like that, and you'll get your way to the verse reference. Let me show you the context slider, and I see there's a question asking what a flex search is. I will get to that when we get to words in just a moment. Search for multiple disparate verses we've done. Context slider is important, and this is right here. So you've got the search entry area right here. You've got the search token where you can change between verses and words. We'll go to words in Flex shortly, but we're still in verses. And then you've got your version here. You've got your context slider here. Again, you could hover over a thing if you don't know what it is in Accordance. And here, hovering over the context slider says, show additional context for each verse in your search result. Now, this is going to be even more useful, I think, when we get to word searches. But I did want to point this out now, that the context slider 0 shows hit verses only. 1 through 9 shows that number of verses going before and after, and A is all. And I'll have us do this again when we get to words, but just to show you now, if I type in John 3:16, my context slider, and you can even change this in the settings, which let me know if you have a question about that. But my context slider is at A. So I'm seeing John 3:16 with all context, which is to say, this search has been run, and the results are that John 3:16 is highlighted in bold and red, but the search results are actually the entire Bible, because I've also said context slider set to A. In other words, I've told Accordance, show me John 3:16 and all of its context, which in the NET Bible is everything, Genesis all the way to Revelation. And I'm using the go-to box to show that. We'll come back to the go-to box as well. So that's A. Now, suppose I just wanted to see John 3:16. Well, I can just slide this context slider all the way to 0, which is going to give me just that hit, just that verse with no context. And if you were to run a search with disparate verses or multiple verses, maybe you want to see all the 3:16s in the Bible. It would take you a while to type that out, but you know, if you did Mark 3:16, John 3:16, something like that, your context slider set to 0 would show you just a list of those verses. But your context slider set to A shows you everything, and then 1 through 9 is that number of verses in between. So I put those numbers there in your handout. That's from the help files. That's the context slider. We'll look at that again when we get to words. That becomes useful, I think, for me anyway. I'll speak for myself. I find it more useful when I'm doing word searches, because I may search for a word like love, which we'll do, and I may get to just that single verse, and there may be a pronoun and the referent is a couple verses away, and I don't know who's loving whom until I move the context slider. So we will get to that. So we've covered searching by verses, searching for a reference. Again, this is pretty basic, pretty simple. I want to make sure, though, this is pitched at a level of, if you just downloaded Accordance yesterday, that this makes sense. So we've looked at searching for a reference, for multiple references, brief allusion to the context slider. And here's just kind of a fun tip. We'll pause after this and check in for questions. This is straight out of the help files, but if you add F or FF, and that stands for following, and you'll see this sometimes in like scholarly literature or maybe even your study Bible, that means whatever comes next. And you can get really specific with this. Again, I'm not sure that you need to with the context slider set to A, and you can scroll up and down, but I did think this was kind of fun. If you add a single F, it adds 1 to the last unit. So if you type in Genesis 2:4F, that adds verse 5. Genesis 2, like the chapter, F includes chapter 3, and so on. And then FF includes everything if you want to distinguish. But again, for me, I mean, there may be scenarios where you find it useful to know this. But for me, I mostly will run my search, get to where I need to be, and then decide how much context do I need to see. Typically, when I'm searching by verses, it's to get into a passage, and then I want to look at it in context. So I tend to use this context slider. But it may also be, like I said, that you're reading something in a PDF or another e-reader, and there's a whole string of references. You know, maybe it's making the point that God is loving, and it's got 30 references, and you can just copy and paste them right into your search entry area. Let me just speak to the go-to box, and as I do that, maybe take a moment or two to form any questions that you've got. You can type them in to the chat. This go-to box is another way to work with your search results. So if I let me just hit enter. And by the way, going to the search entry area and hitting enter clears everything and takes you right to the beginning of the book. I can get 2 different books of the Bible from this go-to box at pretty much any time. It's specific, though, in that the go-to box takes you to different parts of your text, only where there are hits. So right now I have not run a search. This is blank, and I can see everything in the Bible. So I could essentially browse my way to John 1:1 with that. It's not the most elegant way of browsing, and it's not meant to be either. Accordance 14 offers more here in terms of a verse selector. But suppose I had run a search, and I'm just going to preview word search here, and we'll get to this in a minute after we pause for questions. But if I search for the word love, I can jump ahead to like Colossians right away and get to its hits on love. And this will only show books that have a hit. Let's pick a more unique word. Why don't we do, let's do something like table. All right, so Genesis does not have the word table in it, at least in the NET. My hit results in the go-to box adjust accordingly. So this go-to box, you could think of it as a contextual way to browse your results. and it will narrow down and only show you particular books that you've got. And the reason that this is here, well, I don't know because I didn't program it, but I think the reason this is here is so that you can quickly get ahead to Proverbs without having to type in Proverbs here and thereby lose your search. So your search results stay here. Like I want to study all 71 verses that have the word table, all 75 hits. So verses are here, hit numbers are here. And I want to keep that search, but I want to jump ahead to Isaiah. Well, I can do that easily using the go-to box. So that's another good tool in your arsenal of searching. And by the way, you can also just go in there and type into it. And so if you want to look right away for is the word table in Colossians, hit enter after typing in Colossians. It's not, it will take me to the next closest one. But you've got that there as another option to navigate your results. All right, let's stop there. And what questions or comments do you have? And I may respond in the questions box, or you can type them in and I may read them out loud. All right, let's talk about searching by words. And of course, questions, comments can come in at any time. So we've looked just at searching by verses, and we'll again use the search entry area some more and the go-to box some more as we search by words. Here's where Accordance gets powerful. Not that it's not already somewhat powerful with the verse search, but this is, I think, where it starts to get really fun. And this is what we're going to build on for multiple series. We will not, for multiple parts, we will not spend 7 parts of this series with verse searches. It's really word searches and combinations of words that we get to go in depth on. So let's first talk about flex versus words. What is the difference? Again, this search entry area, it's got 4 options, and fundamentally I'm choosing between a word search and a verse search. So a heading search is a word search of all of the headings, and that's just, you know, like if you open up a print Bible, you've got the bold passage headings. You can search all of those in accordance by word. It's still a word search. The flex search is a word search, but it's grammatically flexible. It's not flexible in the sense of how you would, maybe you Google the word house and your results have home or dwelling place or apartment or something like that. That's flexible conceptually, but in accordance, a flex search is just a grammatical flex. And so I'll show you what that is with this example, love. Let's first go to words, and I'll type in the word love. And you can see here, by the way, even before I start typing, or just one letter, this quick entry that we had for verse searches comes up, and it gives me some suggestions. It doesn't know what I'm searching. In fact, it's very flexible. Maybe I'm about to search for Lamentations 3, and it just wants me to have that option. Now, if I were to do that, look at that, it changes it to verses for me, which is kind of cool. Again, Accordance has all these little built-in flexible things. So you don't even really need to change it, because it will, like if I'm in verses, but I start typing in LOVE and hit enter, it's gonna run it as a word search. So I like to change it just because it helps me keep track, but you don't have to unless there's a word that is also a book name, but that's a very specific case. So I've run the search for the word love, seeing that there are lots of variations of love that I could have searched, but I'm just going to search LOVE. Now, what that's going to do is it's going to search that exact word in Accordance. LOVE, it's going to search that, and you'll see with all of these results, and I've got 492 results that span 450 verses, which means there are that many verses that have more than one of the word love. But every result here is going to be LOVE, which is great, and maybe that's what I wanted. Suppose, however, that I want love not just as I love, you love, but I also want he loves or she loves, or even in the past tense, I loved or you loved. That's where the flex search comes in. What the flex search will do, and you'll notice this 492 number is going to go up. It will search and return results for love, L-O-V-E, but it will also give me any variations on that. So if love is a verb, then it will show me all of the different conjugations of that. So let's try love as a flex search. Keep your eye on this number here, 492, as I hit enter. And that, as expected, jumps up to 685. And now I've got love, but I've also got loved. And I've got loves. And so this gives me much more for my search. Now, if this all kind of comes down to what are you trying to do in accordance? If I'm trying to preach a sermon about love, I'm probably going to want the flex search, because it doesn't really, for the initial research I'm doing for my sermon, I don't really care what grammatical part of speech or what conjugation it is. I want to see all of the examples of somebody loving somebody else, just as a starting point. So the flex search will do that. And this is where that context slider, I said I'd circle back to it. This is where it comes in handy. I've run this search. I've got 596 verses showing, 685 hits. My context slider is at 0, so this is great for a list. But some of these don't have context. This one does. Isaac loved Esau, but Rebekah loved Jacob. Pretty clear who that's about. But go down and some of these verses, he went and got the goats and brought them to his mother. She prepared some tasty food just the way his father loved it. Well, I could probably infer who that is, but instead of doing that, I can also move my context slider. So I just moved it by one verse, and that looks like that's enough to answer my question. Or maybe 2 or 3 verses are required. And then when I'm done, move it back to 0, scroll down, read through these different results. Here I get Exodus 15:13, by your loyal love, you will lead the people whom you have redeemed. It raises the question, who is the you? Well, it sure looks like God, but let's be sure of it. Scroll the context slider forward. And now I can see the broader context. This is addressed to you, O Lord. Another thing you can do is slide your context slider all the way to A, and that will give you everything, as we noted earlier. This is running the search for love and giving me the results with all context showing. The downside to this, which Accordance will address, but I don't know how long I'm going to scroll until I see the word love again. So if you keep your eye right here, you'll notice there's a hit option there. Keep your eyes there. It disappears when the context slider is at 0, but as soon as you move the context slider to A, it shows up. And that's so that I can see my results in context, but skip ahead to the next one. And I'm navigating by hit. So I'm telling Accordance, go to the next instance of love, go to the next instance of love, go to the next instance of love. But I'm seeing it in context, and at any point, I can scroll up or down to see who is this talking about? What is the action at hand here? And then when I'm done with that, navigate again by hit. And then if I've maybe done enough of that and want to get back out to my overview, I can scroll this back to 0. Remembering too, that you've got this go to box. So if I wanted to skip ahead to the Gospels, I've got my search run. Remember, when it's grayed out, you have run the search. So the hit results are still showing. And I go to this go to box and I can jump ahead to Matthew. And that takes me right there, Matthew 5:43. And because I have run the flex search, I'm going to see love and also loves, loved, and so on. So that's the difference between flex and words search. The words search is really searching the letters that you type in, L-O-V-E. We'll get a little bit more into detail with this before we're done today, but that's probably a good basic example to see it. Another one is if we did something like forgive. You can see here, I've typed in words, or I've set it to words, so I get just those letters, but when I change it to flex, I get forgive and forgiving and forgiven. Accordance is really specific, though, in how it understands flex. So if forgive is a verb, it will give me any verbal version, any inflection, any conjugation of forgive, but it will not give me the noun form. So if I want forgiveness, I need to do another search for that. So just note that flex, again, it's not like what you might get with a search engine online. And there are other ways to get a more, Accordance has got some other search options we could use here, but the flex option, it won't give you both a noun and a verb. But there's a trick here too, which is a wildcard character of the asterisk. Now English, with many words, has a root that might be the same between the noun and the verb. This is not always true, but it's true here. So as I'm typing in forgive, let's just start over, F-O-R-G-I, or let's even just do F-O-R, yeah, let's do F-O-R-G-I. So I've got so far forgive, which is a verb, forgiven, which is a verb participle, forgiveness, which is a noun. If I want all of it, I can type in an asterisk and it will give me anything that starts with F-O-R-G-I. So in this case, actually I'm going to change this to a word search. That's the same. So in this case, if forgiveness as a word is in here, it will show up in my search results because I've done F-O-R-G-I. Everything here will, so Nehemiah 9:17, let's just check. If Nehemiah 9:17 is showing, and the way to get there quickly, as we know, is the go to box, and sure enough, there it is. So that's the asterisk, which you can use in combination with the flex search, but the asterisk is even more, shall we say, flexible than the flex search, if that makes sense. It gives you more control over what you're searching and more options. So if I were doing a topic search on love, I would even just do L-O-V. I mean, you just see all these variations here, and then the asterisk to catch everything. And that just means all words starting L-O-V. And that's going to give me 701. That's more than what we were looking at before. We're going to move on next to searching by phrase. That's just searching a word. And in some words, I wanted to use words like love and forgive that have different inflections. Some words, this is just not an issue. Like if we're searching by a character, for example, let's say I want to look up Saul. You know, that word isn't really inflected in English. I mean, we might have the possessive, but Saul is going to be Saul. That's an easier search to run, and so I don't need to think as much with some words about flex and asterisk and all that. But just think through the word that you're searching. You know, are there other ways this could be inflected, and if so, go to the flex search. So if I do Israelite, for example, that's going to give me singular and plural. But there may be instances where you want to use the asterisk, which, like I said, gives you some more specific control over the search that you're running. We'll move to phrases next. That's where we start to build on kind of the basic understanding of searching. And we will, again, just scratch the surface today with phrase searches, because Accordance gets really powerful here with what's called connecting commands. So there are different ways you can search phrases, but we'll do just a basic overview of that today. What questions do folks have? And especially if you haven't asked a question, I'll prioritize anyone who hasn't had a chance to ask yet, but I will read and respond to all of these. So we'll just go through. Somebody says, yeah, and I think I may have, so here's one question. Let me put this in the chat so you can see what I'm responding to. I think I may have answered this as we went. Does flex search give every word that begins love, like lovesick? Okay, so no, I don't think so. Let's try. So love sick, let's just search that word. So we're gonna look for 2 Samuel 13:2. 2 Samuel 13:2. In fact, I'm going to duplicate this tab and keep this over here so that I don't have to remember that. All right, so this is a reference over here. Now we're gonna go, and the question was, does flex search give every word that begins love? Love's a funny word just because it can be a noun and a verb, and I'm not sure how Accordance parses it. Let's see if it has 2 Samuel 13:2 here. It does not. And so this is why I would favor the asterisk. Now, unfortunately, Accordance is, I think what Accordance is doing is interpreting love as a verb here and not as a noun, which is too bad, because it doesn't know for sure that you mean it as a verb. Maybe you mean it as a noun and you want to do a flex search on that, and it's just not picking it up for whatever reason. Because again, the flex search is flexible only with respect to that. Like if it's a verb, it will give you all the inflections, but only of a verb, and likewise with a noun, only singular, plural, so on and so forth. So yes, the best way to do that, and I'm so glad you asked that question. I think this is, next time we teach this class, I'll use an easier example, but maybe this is good because it really helps us understand what flex can and can't do. The asterisk is the way to go here. If I type in LOVE asterisk, or even LOV asterisk, now I'm gonna see 2 Samuel 13:2. I mean, I'm certain of it before I even look at it, because that's included in words that start with LOV. So when I go to 2 Samuel 13:2, it will be right there. So yeah, just note well that the asterisk is probably better than the flex search for something like a conceptual search that you might do in Accordance. Thanks for asking, that's a great question. Let's see, what other questions do folks have? Yeah, so the asterisk will work. I don't know that there's a difference between an asterisk search run with flex and one run with words. Let's check. So LOV asterisk with flex 701 words. Yeah, because I think that asterisk basically overrides the flex. So for example, if you, and this is getting pretty arcane, but if you go to flex and type in LOVE, 685 hits, including loved in Genesis 25. But if you put love in quotes and run a flex search, it basically cancels out the flex part of the search and gives you LOVE only, which is the same as the word search. So what that means, and this is good because it really means you don't have to spend a whole lot of time toggling here, because Accordance will respect and even prioritize any punctuation that you put in to your search command, if that makes sense. So the second that I put in a quote mark, it becomes a quote search or an exact search. And it will not give me LOVES, even if this search token is set to flex. So again, that's nothing you have to remember, because it will do it regardless. Just like when I have this set to flex search, if I start typing in Jonah, I may be searching by word, but I may also be wanting to look it up by book. I can just select it there and it will change it for me. So that's kind of a neat feature that it's got there, that there's some adaptability there. But yeah, any punctuation you put in will override whatever else the flex command or whatever else the flex token here would do. Please let me know if you have a follow-up or if I didn't explain that clearly. Oh, interesting. Okay, great. Thanks for this comment. I'm going to put this in the chat. Good. I should put 14 on this machine. It says the flex search in version 14 finds forgive and forgiveness, not limited to verb or noun only. Wonderful. I did not realize that. But that's great. So if you're on Accordance 14, that distinction won't be an issue. Again, the asterisk, if you use the asterisk enough times, and I've just used it so many times over the years, you may come to rely on it because again, it's just very flexible. But yeah, that's really good to know. So thanks for that comment. And again, I've put that in the chat for folks to see. Oh yeah, somebody asked, how do you make a copy of the search? Yeah, all I did, I'm trying to remember, what did we search again? I just closed it, but it was lovesick, right? So I did lovesick, and I said, all right, I want to save this. I just went to the tab. I mean, you could just leave it and open a new tab, but I right-clicked and went to duplicate tab. And that duplicated the tab, although it kind of unran the search. In other words, it made this search entry area live again. Then I just took this tab, click, hold, drag, drop, and now it's still got this search run. And you can do this multiple times. I mean, I may have 5 or 6 or 7 searches that I want to leave open all at once, and so you can just duplicate tabs until you run out of room, but even then you can stack them. So it was right click, duplicate tab, and you've got a keyboard shortcut for this too. It will show up there. You can even keyboard shortcut your way to duplicate that. And then again, with it in gray, that means the search has been run. You can just kind of leave it there. And now it duplicated the tab and the contents of the search entry area, but I can delete that and start again with a new search. Some of what we're doing now, I'm belaboring a little bit because we are going to build on it, and it will come back. I mean, the way that searching works in accordance is some of the flex and exact and letters and asterisks, and that will all come back when we build on these searches. So apologies if this feels like overdoing some of the basics, but again, I also want to keep this pitched at a basic level. But what's not basic, this is actually getting a little bit more intermediate, and I did not include this the last time. The equal sign is kind of fun to use here. So there are going to be some challenges with searching, maybe with the flex, where or even the regular search. Let me just actually check in on the questions box one more time. Okay, I think we're all set. All right, so let's say I want to look for every time the Bible, and I'll use the NET here, anytime it mentions gods, like G-O-D-S, lowercase g, like, do not run after other gods. I would, in my mind, I would think, well, I know how to spell that. It's G-O-D-S. My quick entry here tells me that I've got 2 words in this text that are GODS, but let's just select GODS. And I notice I'm not searching flex, I'm searching words, because I want, if I do flex, I'm going to get God and gods. Remember, flex with this noun, gods, is plural of the singular God. And so the flex search, as expected, gives me gods. Yes, it's going to be somewhere in here, but also God. Okay, but that's not what I want. I actually want to search, what are the times where the Bible talks about gods? So go to words, which ought to give me a more exact search, and hit enter. But we run into an issue, and this is as expected, and I bring this up to troubleshoot so that if you run into something like this, you know what to do. I did not search capital G, lowercase o-d, apostrophe s. It's not that I'm not interested in that, and it's not very far before I start to get the results I want. So really not a big deal. If I were doing this in real time, probably it would be on some kind of a deadline in between meetings. So I would probably not stop to research the help files and see why this happened. I would just say, all right, I've got my search results here that I want. However, we're here to learn about searching in accordance. So why is this happening, and how do I not get that result? Well, what accordance is doing, it says it's a word search. It's really searching the letters. And so it's searching the letters G, O, D, and S in succession. And for whatever reason, it's not deterred by this possessive, by this apostrophe, or this capitalized letter. So it's doing what it's programmed to do, which is search GODS. It's not searching GOD, which Flex would have done. it's searching GODS, but again, it's showing me God''S. Now we could come at this the other way. Maybe I want to search for gods, like God's image or whatever. Hit enter, and that doesn't want to search that at all. Yeah, okay, there it is. Same thing, same results. In fact, it even changed it to GODS because it didn't like the apostrophe. So what's going on is that Accordance is searching the letters. And if I want to make it not be giving me God''S, it's as simple as putting an equal sign in front of it. So when you've got an ambiguous form like that, and this is going to get probably more helpful if you're doing Hebrew and Greek searches. But if you've got an ambiguous form like that, number one, Accordance essentially alerts you with the quick entry feature, because I'm typing in GODS and it's telling me there are two versions of this that we're going to search. But if you don't want it to do that, just put in equals in front, and now it will not show God''S. The equal sign is a way of making it even more exact. It's as if to say, search these letters, but also respect the case, and differentiate if there's an apostrophe or not. So I've noted that here just almost in shorthand in the handout, but if you wanted then to search for God''S, you're getting both, but just go in front of it and type in the equal sign, and now you're getting only God''S. So that's another, I think that probably puts us more in the realm of intermediate searching, but I have run searches before where I've kind of wondered about that, and this was one of them. So that equal sign is going to make your search even more exact. All right, let's just kind of back out a bit and review what we've done, and I would welcome comments and questions at the end here. We have talked about searching at a very basic level, search entry area being right here. By the way, I had used Accordance for months before I knew you could do this. If you click on this bottom part of the search entry area and hold it, you can drag it down and make it bigger. And I was very pleasantly surprised to see that. Now, this doesn't really matter if you're doing short word searches, but if you were to copy and paste in, a huge list of references, again, maybe you're reading a PDF about or an online article about God and God's love, and there's 100 verses. Well, you can copy and paste them in and see them all by expanding this. So we started by talking about the search entry area. We've been looking throughout our time at the go-to box in ways in which that might be useful. We spent some time searching by verses, and whether that's a reference or multiple disparate verses. We looked at how Accordance is really flexible when it comes to book abbreviations. Accordance does not require what would be required of you if writing a paper or in a class, which is to learn the standard, usually it's the SBL, Society of Biblical Literature abbreviations, or whatever convention. All Accordance needs is enough to differentiate books, and it will do it. We looked at the context slider and where that could be helpful. And then we spent some time with searching by words, talking about the difference between flex and word search. Searching phrases we did not do. So let me just briefly do that. And then we talked about the equal sign. Let's close with searching phrases because we do have a little more time, and we'll still do questions. When I go to the search entry area, and there's nothing here, you remember back at the very beginning, it says enter a word or phrase. So I want to search for, let's say, love God. And I just want to see what comes. So I'm going to hit enter, and I've got 4 hits across 3 verses. And this is words, which is more exact than flex. In fact, it is, you could think of it as an exact search with that caveat that we saw with the capital letter and the apostrophe before. So what we've got here is all things work together for good for those who love God. There's my phrase. It has searched those letters exactly as I put them in. If anyone says, I love God and yet hates his fellow Christian, he is a liar, because the one who does not love his fellow Christian whom he has seen cannot love God whom he has not seen. And then 1 John 5:2, whenever we love God and obey his commandments. All right, so that's great. And maybe that was the exact phrase that I was looking for. Maybe I wanted to look at something a little bit more general, like people loving God. And so for that, I can go to the Flex search. Now what happens here, and this is maybe a bit of a preview for future sessions, this is going to show the word love and the word God when they occur together in the same verse. And so in that sense, Flex works a little differently when it's a phrase. So what we did not get was loves God, like we would have if we searched love and got loves. So again, love God searched by words gives you that exact phrase. Searched by Flex gives you love and God within a verse, which may be fine, maybe what you want. We're going to look in the future at ways to get more specific, and if what you want to find is love God, loved God, loving God, there are multiple ways to do that in accordance, and we'll look at some of them in the future. For now, I would just say maybe this is what you want, maybe it's not. This could be a great place to use that asterisk. And what this is going to give you now is love, any word that starts with L-O-V followed by God. So love God, loves God, loved God, loving God. And change that to word search, which in this case I had to do that because the Flex search was still searching them across the verse, but go back to word search. And now I've got 8 hits, whereas before when I just searched love God, I had 4 hits. So when I replace that E with an asterisk, now I've got loves God and loving God, and that shows up there. We'll begin next time with a review of this, and then that will be a springboard to multiple word searching, which, as I've been saying, and you may know this already because maybe you already do it, but when you're searching multiple words, that's where it gets really fun in accordance. We're going to look at some of these commands and or not, followed by, preceded by. You can get very specific. For now, LOV asterisk God has given us love and loves and loving God, and that may be enough to work with your study, but if you want to get more precise and creative, we'll cover that in future sessions, starting next week, in fact. So next time we're going to talk about using some of these search commands. There are a lot of them. We'll go through, I think last time we did this, we went through all of them or almost all of them. And we're also going to talk about contextual ways to search words. So you may not be using your search entry area. You can search words by right-clicking or moving from one resource to another. We'll start to talk about that next time. But let's use our last minute or so for any questions that folks may have. And again, especially if you haven't gotten to ask anything, I encourage you type it into the chat, and I'll respond, and then we'll wrap up in just a moment here. Let me check in on questions. Oh, somebody says, why does the ESV equal here? Let me put this in the chat so people can see. This will be easier to respond to. And that I'm not sure. I'd have to look. Yeah, interesting. Oh, well, no, that's working for me. I think this is kind of funny, and I don't know why it does this, but I am typing in GOD. So I'm typing in equals capital G, lowercase OD, apostrophe S. And the question is, why does that search in the ESV only return God's GODS? I think what Accordance is doing is, and this is hard because you can't see my hands, so I'll just have to describe this to you. I'm typing in the letter S right now, and my hands are off the keyboard. But notice this blue highlight thing. It is defaulting down to GODS in the quick entry. So if I just hit enter, it actually selected that. Now I didn't want it to do that. And in fact, you can turn, I think you can turn off that quick entry feature. I'd have to find that, but I'm almost sure that can, yep, disable quick entry. So you could even get rid of that if you wanted to. Now, that's not even, that little drop down isn't even showing up. And so it won't change that search for you. Let me know if that doesn't answer your question. It's not liking this quotation mark, so I might have to circle back and see what's going on there. But yeah, if what you're describing is happening, I think it's because of that quick entry. You don't have to disable quick entry, so you could keep it there and just know that you want to make sure it's actually selecting that one, and then we'll run the search. So that's a great question. Thanks. Yeah, here's a comment. I'll just put this in the chat. Oops, I missed a letter there. Accordance's table of words to include in a flex search is very good, but it is not perfect. Yeah, and again, I think probably the way to go here is to use that asterisk and get as exact as possible. Yeah, here's to use. There's a way to search for punctuation. Let's circle back to that next time, because I think that would be good for us to cover. We'll come back to that. Let me just look over these comments. Tell you what, I'm going to go ahead and end the recording, and then I'll stay on for another minute or two if folks have more questions. But if you are watching on the recording, thanks so much for being here. Again, Abram KJ at AccordanceBible.com will get you access to this handout if you're interested.